Well, what's going on, everybody? My name is David, and we are so glad that you came to hang out with us today. And listen, if this is your first time, we're so glad to have you here, either online or in person. And we're so excited that you're hanging out with us that we simply just want to give you a gift for doing so. And a way that you could do that, because maybe you're like, hey, I'm at home watching, or maybe you're sitting down here, you're like, yeah, I really don't want to interact with anybody. Totally get it. We made it really easy. All you got to do is text LHNEW to 21,000. It should be like coming up on the screen like right now. That's LHNEW to 21,000. Now, some of you are like, what's up with the number? I don't know. They don't tell me these things. But what they did tell me to say is that if you text that, our team will send you a gift card and make sure that you get that. And listen, everything that we do here is inspired by our awesome mission, and that is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. And one of the ways that we do that is a service just like this that you're participating in. And how today is going to look, how this service is going to look, is our awesome band that's behind me. They're going to sing a couple songs. Our lead pastor, Matt Brown, he's going to finish up his series, Better For It. And listen, our whole goal for you today is that you connect to God, that you experience God's love, either if it's by a song, maybe by the message, or by simply just hanging out with us today. So why don't you go ahead and stand up and let's sing together about God's love.
It couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, treasures of fame, never enough. You came along and you put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain, God of the mountain, is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. Sing it out. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who
Awesome. That was amazing. You guys can go ahead and take a seat. You know, there's one thing that we can all agree on, and it doesn't matter what you believe or where you're at in life, and that is that the teenage years are complicated, especially in this day and age. And us at Lifehouse, we understand that. We get it. And parents, I just want you to understand, we are your biggest cheerleaders. We are on the sideline just encouraging and cheering you on, hoping that you win. But it just doesn't stop there. See, here at Lifehouse, we're just not happy with just staying on the sideline and cheering you on, hoping that you win. No, see, we want to help and partner with you so that you win. And that's the whole reason why we created our middle school and high school environments, Transit and Inside Out. See, Transit meets during second service at 11 o'clock, and that's for middle schoolers. And Inside Out, our high school environment, it meets in Sunday evenings from 4:30 to 6. And our whole goal, our whole mission is to lead students into a growing relationship with Jesus. And a way that we do that is by creating a place, by creating an environment where they can get closer to God. But we think to truly partner with you and to truly help you parents and you students to win, that we would provide a person, an adult small group leader who's passionate about helping students grow in their relationship with Jesus, but also to help you parents win during those complicated years. And actually, I have two high school small group leaders here with me, and I want to go ahead and call them up. My boy Isaac is coming up, and my good friend Ellie is coming up here, and they're gonna, what's going on, guys? Good to see you, good to see you. Thank you for coming. And actually, my boy Isaac, he has served in Inside Out last year, but as an assistant small group leader to sophomore boys, and this year, he is now a leader of freshman boys for about a month, and it's been really, really cool to see that. And Ellie, my good friend here, she is the senior girls small group leader, and she's been doing that since they were freshmen, 4 years. That's crazy. And you know, what I just want you guys to do for a moment is, can you just share a moment or awesome time or moment that you had with your group so far? Give you the mic.
Thanks, David. Real quick before I answer that question, I just wanted to say I wish I would have had something like this in terms of a small group atmosphere when I was younger. I know it definitely would have helped me make a lot less mistakes, and just to be able to have someone like David and Ellie and all the other small group leaders, I mean, they're taking their time, giving their time, walking beside these kids, so it's really cool. I'm glad to be a part of it. Like David mentioned, I do the freshman guys now, so we've only had about a month together, so I haven't got to spend a ton of time with them, but the two things that I'm really excited about, and the one being the consistency that they've shown, and I definitely have to give credit to some of you parents out there who probably have something to do with that, but they're showing up every Sunday, they're ready to learn, ready to have fun, just being present with us, and also too, the amount of participation that we're getting within our small group times. I know it's hard to talk about that stuff, and especially in front of people, so the fact that they're showing up and they're participating, I think, are two big wins.
Oh, 100%. Those amazing wins. Ellie, same thing. Is there a moment, I know you've been navigating life with them for almost 4 years now, but you got an awesome moment you'd love to share with us?
Yeah, as the girls go into their senior year, I think rather than a specific moment that sticks out to me, it's more just getting to see all of the overall growth and transition that the girls have gotten to go through over the last few years. I've gotten to watch them go from freshmen who are shy and hesitant to get involved in student ministry and then accept Christ and start their relationship with him. And then now I get to watch them really live out their faith, and they're so good at inviting their friends and reaching their friends who maybe don't know Christ yet. So it's awesome to just see them really get it and live out that calling. So we've definitely walked through some hard things over the last few years, but it's totally worth it.
Awesome. That is amazing. Thank you guys so much for sharing that with us, and just for partnering with parents. You guys and the rest of the small group leaders are rock stars. Thank you guys so much. Why don't you guys give them a round of applause as they head off. Thank you guys so much. You know, I love how Ellie said that in these last couple of years they've been navigating life, and that now they get it. And that journey that she's been going on with them has been amazing. And I hear Isaac, and here he is starting with these freshman boys, and here he is excited about the journey and to go through these complicated years of those teenage years. And all I want to say after that is, you know, students, listen, we're here for you. And parents, please listen to me. We just don't want to be on the sideline. We just don't want to be your cheerleader. We want to partner with you, and we want to help you during those complicated years, because I know we can. And I just want to say that stories like that, of senior girls getting it and having someone to navigate life with and having a place to go, is all because of your generosity. And we get to see stories like that and lives changed because of your generosity. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Let me pray for us. Father, I pray that your Holy Spirit would just guide this service. Pray that you'll just give the words to Matt that will speak to us, encourage us wherever we're at in our faith walk or just life in general. Thank you for the people that volunteer to help out in all the environments, to make a difference in people's lives, and just to help them understand that you love them, and to go through this thing that we call life that's so complicated. So we just thank you for your love and for your grace. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Oh, that's awesome. My name's Matt. I'm the lead pastor here. And I just had to say something about Isaac and Ellie. You may have noticed Isaac's up here wearing all that gear on. That's because he serves on our production team. And so he is helping to make this service happen and showing back up at 4:30 to work with our high school students. I'm so impressed by that. And Ellie, I don't know if you know, she's having a baby. Isn't that exciting? So I'm like, ooh, yeah, Ellie's gonna have a baby. And she's working with students too. It's just so like encouraging me to see those people coming up behind my generation leaning in hard. Hey, welcome if you're online, if you're in the room. We're so glad that you are here. We are wrapping up the series that we have been in. And throughout the series, this made me ask this question. Have you ever noticed that there's just certain people we really, really respect? And the reason we respect them is for the way that they handle adversity. I mean, there's some people you know and I know that have walked through the fire, walked through the valley of the shadow of death, walked through pain and injustice. I mean, like injustice, like it's not fair. But they make the decision not to hurt back, not to retaliate, not to become bitter. Maybe someone you know has faced an incredible health challenge, but they did not lose their ability to love in their life. And what we've been saying over the last couple of weeks is when we see that happen, what people are doing is they're using their superpower. This superpower, this thing that God has given all of us, not to become like the people we despise, not to reflect evil in our world, but actually use our superpower to redeem bad and as our series title has said, to be better for it. And we all know we've come out of some stuff lately in the last 6 months. Maybe for you it's the last 6 years, corporately as a country and as you individually, that has pain in it and tough times. and tears and heartache. And what we've said in this series, it would be a shame to go through all the pain and not gain from it. So we've been asking the question, how can we be better for it? Specifically, the core question is, what should I begin, like today maybe, doing that I should have been doing all along? Because we would say this, when we got into the pandemic deal, there's some things that we wish we'd have been doing that would have prepared us for us being together in quarantine, or maybe not having as much money, or our relationships wouldn't be as fractured, our faith wouldn't be as fragile. So when the next round of things come in, because you know this, they're coming, something else is going to happen. I mean, every day I wake up and I look at the news or I flip on my phone, I go, well, what's happening today? Something else is coming. How can I be prepared for it and better for it as we move into the future? Because it would be tragic to lose our perspective on this. So last week we talked about our superpower being this simple idea of respondability, the ability to respond with a faith-filled answer to our lives. Because we always have a choice, don't we? We can react, and let me tell you, no one is better than reacting to things than me. You ask my adult children about the times I reacted, and normally they would say, when Dad just reacted, it was poor for our whole family. But when Dad chose to respond, and he had a faith-filled response, it was a game changer. And for some of you, you react because that was what was modeled for you. You just watched people react, and your house blew up, and your dad got mad, and your boss, walked out of the room yelling at you. And they forfeited. He forfeited. Maybe you forfeited your reputation with your family, your friends, your church, or someone along the way. Maybe your destiny, maybe your future. But the right response, when we have the right response, especially if it's a faith-filled response, and if you don't have faith in your life, we're so glad you're here asking the faith questions. But the right faith-filled response has the ability to take pain and suffering and actually redeem it. But when we don't, when we just react, it's just simply this: to react to circumstances sets us up to reflect those circumstances. When I react to the evil in the world or the frustrating things in the world, I just become what I'm reacting to. And we do not want to be that, versus that measured response. I don't give up control of what's best in my life. But the reason we miss this, and I think the reason this is so hard, is we are broken human beings. And the response that has the potential to reverse the natural course of things, like the ugly things in our world and your world, isn't natural. For me to respond and not react is not natural. For me just to feel away and just let you have it and post something on social media and blast my kids or whoever's closest to me, that's natural. That comes as an intuitive thing. But to respond and have patience and make sure I know what I'm doing and saying and reacting is a whole different game. And here's the beauty of this: God has invited you to use your superpower. And what our faith is based on is a man who came into this world, sent from God. He was actually God's son. That when everything went to hell for him, Jesus, he did not react, he responded. And he did not fight back. He did not save himself, but he saved us. It's incredible. Now, years and years before Jesus came was a man named Joseph, who we talked about last week. And we left off talking about the story of Joseph. He was 25 years into this journey of, just terrible pain and agony and suffering and injustice. But Joseph used his superpower, and his superpower was sustaining and course reversing and sanity preserving in his life. And ultimately, we're going to find out for the rest of the world. And we see, once again, never underestimate the power of a measured response. And here's what's so cool about Joseph as we get into his story again today. In the middle of him making these responses, because bad things would happen and bad things would happen, he could not see the benefit of the response. But 4,000 years later, it is a story worth telling. It is something to celebrate in our world. So just to catch up, if you missed last week, we've been talking about Joseph, Jacob's son. And literally, he's Jacob's son because he was Jacob's son. We kind of made that up to make fun with that a little bit. In his story, he was kidnapped after he was sold by his brothers and sabotaged. He was sold twice, one to slave traders, then another time to Potiphar's house. He was framed when Potiphar's wife wanted to have sex with him, and he said no, and Joseph did the right thing, but that right thing ended up in a whole lot of trouble, and sometimes that happens. You do the right thing, and you still get in trouble for it, and then he was in prison for a very long time. And this is where Joseph's story may intersect with your story, because no one was looking for Joseph because his family, his father, thought he was dead. And you may feel that today. Hey, no one's even looking for me. And certainly no one was looking out for him. And you may have showed up here today going, no one's even looking out for me. No one cares. But listen to this. Joseph, as we get into the story, responded as if God were with him when it looked as if God had abandoned him. And this brings us to the question that we asked last week. What would it look like for someone in your circumstances to live through your mess or whatever you got going in as if God could be trusted? I mean, we know what's normal when we hit bad circumstances. We just react. But what does it look like when you're like, I can trust that God is with me even in this tough time? And that's the story of Joseph. He's been falsely accused by Potiphar's wife for a crime he did not commit, and he's in prison. This is where we left off last week. That Joseph's master took him and he put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Remember, he's in prison for a crime he avoided, but he still got punished for it. And then we're told, but while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. And again, we ask this question, how could God be with him in the middle of tough circumstances? Because that does not jive with how we view God. When God's with us, things are good. And when God's not with us, things are bad. But this is bad, but Joseph somehow, looking back, knew God was with him. But he didn't really feel it all the time. It goes on. He was with him, and he showed him kindness. This word kindness in the original language actually means loving kindness. Not just kindness, but this deep love and kindness. It's a covenant between God and Joseph and God and us. But man, God, you're not showing up. I'm sitting in prison. I don't know how this is loving kindness. It goes on. He showed him kindness and granted him favor. I guess it would have been good if it would have just stopped there. In the eyes of the prison warden. He showed him favor. But again, Joseph might have wondered, what does favor really look like? After all I've been through, God, how is this kindness and how is this favor? And again, that's where your story may feel today. And you may feel like Joseph felt when he might have thought, I wish God would go be with someone else for a change. You ever thought about that? You ever feel like, hey, I'm trusting God, but God, if this is what trusting you feels like, I wish you'd go be with someone else. I wonder if Joseph felt that, hey, I wish you'd show this kind of favor to Potiphar, that'd be fair. Or Potiphar's wife, or hey, God, go show some of this favor. I'm sitting in prison to my brothers, because if this is what favor looks like with you, I wish they would get this kind of thing. Well, Joseph is sitting in prison with all this emotion and probably frustration, still holding on to God, and he sits there for months. And then it was years. And then it was many years and no change. And then this weird twist of events happens. Pharaoh apparently had a butler and he had a baker that he had gotten in odds with. And he threw the butler and he threw the baker into prison. It's this weird thing. Now remember, Joseph is in charge of part of the prison at least. And so maybe Joseph is serving them breakfast one morning and the butler and the baker both had these strange, detail-driven dreams that were full of all kinds of intricacies. And they thought, hey, here's this young Hebrew. We've heard he's got some talent in this area. Joseph is good at everything. And they say, hey, Joseph, let us tell you our dreams and do something with it. And Joseph said this. He said, do not, remember, this is years of sitting in prison. Do not interpretations belong to God? And this is so astounding to me because he's still thinking about God. After all he's been through, he's still looking back and, hey, what about God? He still believes, he still trusts. Okay, I'm going to respond in this moment. I mean, you've been in here for 3 days, butler and baker. I've been in here for years, but I'm still, instead of reacting and being ticked off and being angry and misrepresenting God, I'm going to respond. Do not interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams. The butler, and who was probably really the wine taster, but he was a butler, tells Joseph his dreams. And Joseph smiles. He's like, hey, I got good news, wine taster, which is not a bad gig unless the wine is poison. Pretty good job for some of you. He goes on, he says this, within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head and restore you to your position. That's good news. You got a couple days in the pit with me, in the prison with me, and you're going to be restored. This is pretty good. And it's interesting because we get a little bit of an insight to Joseph's life because he gives good news, but he's still reeling from his life circumstances. He's not immune to the pain that he's in, because sometimes that's the picture we portray as Christians. Oh, we trust God. We're walking through our pain. It doesn't hurt. It's not bad. There's no consequence. But that's not how Joseph feels. He feels every part of his circumstances. Listen to what he tells them. But after you're freed, but when all goes well with you, remember me. I think God remembers me. I'm trusting in that, but I'm going to hedge my bets. Will you remember me too? And show me kindness, because that loving kindness God has given me, I'm so thankful for it, but it's not quite enough. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. This is so hard. And this is what happened to me. I was forcibly, he doesn't forget the story, I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews. And even here, I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. I am not numb to this. I'm not immune to this. This is painful. I feel in every part of my soul. And sometimes you just got to say it out loud. This is really hard. So remember me. Good things are coming, butler. But remember me when you're back in Pharaoh's court. But now it's the baker's turn, and the baker tells Joseph his intricate dreams. And this is what Joseph probably should have said. Hey, gee, that's a tough one. And I'm afraid I can't help you. That would have been the smart thing to do. But instead, he interprets the dream of the baker. And this is what he tells the baker. He says, within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head and impale your body on a pole. Merry Christmas, man. Anybody else want me to interpret your dreams? This is the news I'm probably gonna give you. And he goes on. He said, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Now, so interesting, both these things happen. In 3 days, the butler is restored, the baker has his head cut off, and Joseph is thinking, all right, the butler's back in the good graces of Pharaoh, the king, the guy that's in charge, and now he's going to tell him about me and my amazing powers that God has given me, and I'm going to finally get out of here. And so every day he'd wake up. Can you imagine this? Sitting in a prison after years and years and years of this, thinking today's going to be the day the butler's going to come through, and the door would open to the prison, and somebody would walk through, and he would go, this is it. And nothing. And the next day, someone would come through with some orders and someone else would get released and Joseph would just sit there. He's been faithful in all things. Day after day, month after month. 2 years goes by since this whole dream thing happened. Now Joseph, he's 30 years old. Remember, he was 17 when this journey started. He is 30 years old. And it comes to fruition that Pharaoh, the guy that's in charge of it all, he starts to have his own weird dreams. And the butler remembers, oh, you know what, Pharaoh? There was this young Hebrew boy in the prison. Remember when you sent me down there? It's okay. I'm not holding that against you, Pharaoh. It was probably my fault. Don't get mad at me. But there was this Hebrew boy down there. I told him my dream, and he interpreted it perfectly. And you ought to ask him what your dream meant, because it plagued and it perplexed Pharaoh. So this is what we're told. I love all this intricate detail. It says, so Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought to the dungeon. Remember, he's 30 years old now. Started this journey when he was 17. And I think this is amazing, when he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. And I think this is in the story for a very specific reason. They're trying to communicate how disgusting Joseph was before he was cleaned up. Filthy, stinky, putrid. He was living somewhat like an animal, and you don't go in front of Pharaoh smelling like an animal. So he got to be cleaned up for the first time in years and years and years. When he's all cleaned up, he came before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, man, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard from the butler. It said that when you hear a dream, that you can interpret it. Now, the next thing Joseph says is maybe the most courageous thing anyone has ever said on the planet that's recorded. Because he is standing in front of Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world. Remember, Joseph is a foreigner. This is the first time he's been clean in a long time. He's probably been fed for the first time well, the first time in a long time. And he is looking at the most powerful man in the world who literally holds his freedom in his hand. What Joseph says next literally is life and death. And he should calculate it well. And I think he does. And here's the most courageous thing maybe anyone has ever said on the planet. He looks at Pharaoh and says, I can't do it. What? The butler's over squirming because remember, the butler's the one that told Pharaoh he could do it, and Joseph is like, I can't do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God. I'm pointing back to God. Now, this is really important for us to understand because Pharaoh didn't just believe in God, he believed in multiple gods. And here's the kicker. Pharaoh believed he was a god. He believed in his own divinity. It was the nature of being a Pharaoh. And the Hebrew, the Jewish people that Joseph was, they believed in one God. And they believed with all of their heart that that one God was more powerful than all the other gods put together. And he just insulted Pharaoh. But God is bigger than all your gods, Pharaoh. He's bigger than you. This is his chance for freedom. And I wonder if it just felt like if you were in the room, it just was slipping out of Joseph's hands. But God, he says, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. I'm sure everybody went in the room that was watching this interaction just went, oh, he's dead. He's dead. This is over, Rover. He's dead. And then Joseph goes in the interpretation of the dream. He's like, Pharaoh, here's what your dream means. You can read the text when you get home today. You should. It's an amazing story. For the next 7 years, there's going to be incredible prosperity. We're going to have more food and more grain and more stores than we ever thought we had. And then after 7 years, there's going to be another 7 years, and it's going to be famine like you've never seen. It's going to be famine that is so bad, you'll forget the good years that came right before him. And in this moment, after he interprets this dream, and Pharaoh's eyes are wide open, Joseph does another unthinkable thing. Remember, he's a Jewish boy who's just insulted Pharaoh by not acknowledging his God. He's been in prison, and he has the audacity to give Pharaoh advice in this next moment. He says, Pharaoh, you got to find somebody to manage all this. You got to appoint someone. You got to put someone in charge. Pharaoh, this is what you should do. This is so fascinating. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man? He points to Joseph. One who is the Spirit of God. And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. Oh my gosh, Pharaoh's listening to this stupid kid. And Pharaoh makes him the prime minister of all Egypt. Only with respect, he says, only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Joseph, you're going to be his second in charge. You know, hours ago, you were in the dungeon. Now you're in the palace, and you're in charge. And Joseph probably thought from his experience, just to be fair to the poor kid, yeah, this is what Potiphar told me. Remember, Potiphar put me second in charge of his house, and look how that worked out. But Joseph decides, God, you must be in the middle of this. And he starts going in to prepping for these years of famine that are coming. And look what we're told. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea, massive amounts of food. It was so much that he stopped keeping the records because it was beyond measure. Joseph, because he just decided, God's with me, and I'm going to do the very best I can no matter what I'm doing. That has been his story. I'm in prison. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm a slave. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm with Pharaoh. I'm going to do the best that I can. He starts buying grain from all the major cities, much as he can. And what happens is he starts to drive the price of grain down, which means he can buy even more grain. He stored this up, and we're told so much you can't even count how much. And then it stopped, and the rain stopped, and the drought came, and the famine came, and people began to starve. And in that moment, Joseph was able to throw open the storehouses and feed his people, or the Egyptian people. What's fascinating about this, and this is where God is in this story, it's not just Egypt that starts to suffer from this famine. All the surrounding areas do also, including the cities up north, where his brothers lived and his fathers lived. And now his brothers and their family and his dad, they're starving. This is what we're told. When Jacob, that's Joseph's father, learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, and I love this as a dad, I mean, come on, dads, why do you just keep looking at each other like, hey, dummies, get up and do something? Fathers, we've all been there, haven't we? Come on, just clean your room once. Just mow the lawn. Do something. I have heard, he says, I've heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. Now remember, now Joseph, he's 40 years old. This whole journey started when he's around 17. He's 40. He's a grown, almost middle-aged man, probably was middle-aged for those days, and he's about to have his superpower, the ability to respond rather than to react, put to the ultimate test. And this is the question that we're going to ask this morning. What would you do in the next moments if you were Joseph? After everything that had happened to him, if it happened to you, what would you do when you find yourself with all the power in the world? Because this is what we know about Joseph, that he was the governor of the land and the person who sold the grain to all its people. So, when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed to him with their faces to the ground. So here they are. He's in charge. He's powerful. And their brothers have walked in. They don't know who he is, but they're bowing before him. He has all the power in the world. Have you ever just wished, I wish I had all the power? Your boss has treated you poorly. Your wife has treated you poorly. A friend's treating you poorly. And you wish, I wish I had all the power in the world. He does in this moment. What would you do in this moment? As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger. Again, imagine that moment. He remembers when he walked up on his brothers as a 17-year-old kid, and they threw him on the ground, and they stripped him naked, and they threw him in the pit. And they debated, do we kill him or do we sell him? Do we kill him or do we sell him? He remembers when they drug him out of that pit and the pain of being sold to strangers and taken away and then sold again to Potiphar's house. He remembers standing on that rock as they bid for his life like he was a stinking piece of property and he could do nothing for it and nothing against it. He remembered when Potiphar's wife accused him of rape when he did nothing wrong but try and be a better person than anybody else was in the world. He remembers all those emotions. He remembers every day waking up in that dingy, dirty, smelly jail cell, wondering, God, where are you? But it was my brothers that did this. So Joseph, he does some recon in this moment. He finds out if his father's alive. He discovers there's another brother. He does all this intricate conversation. But in the next moment, he defies every human instinct that he must have had and I would have. Remember, rearranging your life so you can respond well goes against everything that's in us, every natural response. But he responds in this incredible way. He gathers his brothers alone, everybody else out of the room, except these guys. And he looks at them and he says, hey, I'm Joseph. And they look into the eyes of a 45-year-old man, and they remember the look of the eyes of a 17-year-old brother who's aged and he's weary and he's tired and life has kicked him in the teeth more times than he could count, but they recognize their younger brother. And the first thing he responds, I'm Joseph. Is my father still living? I need to know about my dad. I've been thinking about my dad for all these years, and as much as my heart breaks over my circumstances, it has to break over how he has felt over these years. But his brothers responded just like you would think. They were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. And they should have been, except for the fact that Joseph believed God was with him in the whole journey of his life. They did not need to be. And when it counted most, Joseph responded to his brothers the way almost no one responds in our world. He reacted and he forgave them. Who does that? He says this, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves. Give yourself a break. I mean, who does this? For selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. This is the point of this story. When you believe, when I believe, when we believe that God is with us, we respond as if God is actually with us. And we have a perspective on the tough things in our lives. Like, all right, God, somehow through all this, you had a plan and you had a purpose. And in God's plan and in God's purpose in Joseph's life and all that heartache, he was about to save the world. He was about to save Egypt, and he was about to save his brothers. But there's a bigger story to this that sometimes we forget about the bigger story. His brothers had 12 tribes. And those 12 tribes became the 12 tribes of Israel, which became the nation of Israel. And 1,000 or 2 years later, Jesus actually came from the tribe of Israel. And Jesus came and he saved you. And Jesus came and he saved me. And if Joseph hadn't have done this, I don't know how it all would have worked out. But this was an intricate part of Jesus coming to the world. And when Jesus showed up on the planet, I love this so much. He did for you and he did for me exactly what Joseph did for his brothers. He looked at really wrong, guilty, sinful people and said, listen, do not be afraid. I have every right to just demolish you where you stand, but I'm not going to do that. I am going to forgive you. And if you're not a Christian, you just need to know that this is the story of us. We were rotten, dirty people who could not make up for our sin. And Jesus came and said, I gave my life for you. I forgive you. And it brings us to this powerful idea we've been talking about, that never underestimate the power of a measured response, because it is a game changer. Well, the story wraps up. Joseph brings his family to Egypt. They get to be part of his incredible household, but the problem happens when his father dies, and his brother's like, uh-oh, now that dad's gone, do you think Joseph is going to take his revenge on us? And Joseph knew this. This is what we're told. He came to them, and he threw himself down before him. You imagine? He says, we are your slaves. Or they said, we are your slaves, they said. And here again, Joseph responds rather than reacts. We're told, but Joseph said to them, hey guys, don't be afraid. I am in the place of God. A better translation in the original Hebrew language of this, it literally says, I am God's. I am God's. My life is God's. I just recognize that God has been doing something bigger than just my suffering, and this is it. The world is going to be saved because God got to use me in the middle of it. Don't be afraid. I'm God's. And this is where he says this famous line, you intended to harm me? And we all know how the world reacts when someone intends to harm them. The world, maybe our family, our culture, we just react, and it's visceral and it's ugly. It can turn a victim into a perpetrator really fast. It can turn an innocent person to a guilty person, because pain does that to us. When someone hurts us, we have the perpetual nature to hurt someone else. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish. I love this so much. What is now being done, the saving of many lives. You step out of the story for just a minute, and you can't ever forget that God's intention became reality through one man's catalytic, unprecedented, circumstance-defying response. God accomplished something amazing through Joseph, but part of it was him responding in a way that no one would respond without stepping back and saying, God, I'm going to trust that you're with me, even through this ugly thing. And what's so fascinating is all the way, one decision never made a big difference in Joseph's life. In fact, he couldn't see the difference in the individual decisions when he chose to respond as if God was with him. But when you put all those things together, he ends up as the prime minister of Egypt, and he saved his family, and he saved the nation, and he saved Israel, which brought Jesus to the planet. See, the challenge with our superpowers and how to apply it is we don't choose it. And I don't know what your it is today. You got it, right? And maybe it is politically, you're just upside down. I get it. Maybe with a pandemic, you're beside yourself. With the racial tensions, with all the other things that are going sideways, there's an it that you did not choose. Maybe your it is something that someone did to you personally, or you did to someone else. We don't choose it most of the time. That's part of the problem. But our response determines whether or not we are going to be better for it. It all boils down to how would someone in my circumstances respond? How would they? We know how we'd react. It would probably be ugly and frightening and terrifying. But how would we respond if we were confident that God was with them? Like Joseph. I don't know why I'm going through all this, but I think God's with me. And it's an invitation to implore our superpower, to be better, not bitter. I said that last week, and I've thought all week about how can I be better, not bitter? Because if I end up bitter from whatever I'm going through, that's not good. That's not good for me. It's not good for you. It's not good for any of us. But to hone in just a little bit, how would someone in your circumstances respond? if they were confident God was with them. Guys, listen, this is the best way forward. And you came to church today because you might say, my circumstances, Matt, if you knew, you wouldn't even have preached this message. But what if God was part of your story? What if God was redeeming it and you could join him in redeeming your story, and it could be something beautiful and good? And in another direction, if you're a Christian in the room, if you're not, this doesn't even apply to you. If you're a Christian in the room with all the stuff that's going on in our culture and our world, oh my gosh, people are watching us. And we have this beautiful response to love and give grace and forgiveness, or we can react. And we can be mean, and we can be bitter, and we can be angry. And we can have people go, yep, that's what the Christians do. That's what the Christians do. And Jesus would look at us and go, that's not what we do. Because that's not what I did for a broken world. This is the best way forward. When we can say what Joseph said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That God is actually working tough circumstances out for something good. I believe that. And for some of us, we may not even see what that is until the other side of heaven, but many of us, we see it a little bit down the road in our lives, and we turn back and go, God, I don't want to ever go through that again. But I'm thankful for what you did to me, getting me through it. And I hope you can trust God with your life. In just a second, we're going to sing a song that simply says, yes, I will, in the lowest valleys, in the darkest days. That God, I'm going to hang on to you, and it's an invitation to implore your superpower. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, it's an invitation to say, all right, God, I'm stepping towards you. I'm leaning in, I'm listening, and I'm paying attention. And I'm trying to connect with the God of the universe who loves me. So whatever you're going through, I hope your response today can simply be, yes, I will, every day of my life. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I am so grateful for this story. It overwhelms me to see this young man's reaction to adversity and tough circumstances. I pray in my life I could reflect that. I pray for us that we could reflect that. And for those of us that call ourselves Jesus followers, Lord, that this is our mandate, this is what we do, and this is who we are. Give us the strength and the power to implore our superpower. And for the people in the room that are trying to figure out faith, and if they believe, I pray they'd hear that invitation to a better life, not a bitter life. Because I don't think anyone in this room wants to be bitter, because we know where it leads. Thanks for your overwhelming, unselfish love for us in the worst things possible in your life as you hung on the cross. And thanks for your love and grace. In your name I pray. Amen. Let's stand and let's sing together.
God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy and all my days. Oh yes, I will. Yeah. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. He won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. Working all things out. Oh yes, I will you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my glorify, glorify the name of holy. Nothing can stand against. I choose to pray, to glorify, glorify the name of holy. Nothing can stand against. I choose to pray, to glorify, glorify the name of holy. Nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of holy. Nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy in all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will. Thank you all so much for joining us on this beautiful Sunday. You are dismissed.